The party's over. They say that all good things must end. Call it a night. The party's over. And tomorrow and next year starts the same old thing again.
I'm going to be honest, Craig Harmon. I know you're watching, listening eventually. I did not pick Don Meredith singing "Goodbye, the Nights Are Over" because of the Cowboys Packers game last night.
Although it worked for that too.
It works for that too, but Craig, it was not my intention to troll you. But no, Andy, turn out the lights. The party is over. You said on Friday there was almost no chance we would be having baseball on today's show, and you were correct.
Well, I don't want to be correct.
I know.
If I was lazy, if I was not as a lazy man, I would pull the blinds up here and show you that the sun did come up this morning. So I know some Astros fans were worried since it's been 10 years and they don't really know what was going to happen today. World continues.
I believe I read the fourth longest straight streak of going to the playoffs in Major League Baseball history. Does that sound right? That's
they I watched the broadcast yesterday, and I'm just using Todd Callis as my source. He only said it 7 times, so I'm going to assume that's right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, what do you got to say? You obviously need to do a post-mortem on the season, and we'll obviously spend a couple of episodes doing that. But I also think you need to do a post-mortem on being honest with the reason why these runs just don't happen is because they're hard. It's hard to have a run that is this many seasons in a row of making the playoffs. And so everything that you look at as far as what went wrong this season, you have to also keep that in mind, that these things were destined to end.
Well, and there's nothing I'm going to say that doesn't sound like copium today, but the vast majority of baseball teams don't make the playoffs every year. Even with the expanded playoffs to 12 teams, there's still another 18 teams that don't make it. During this run the Astros have been on, we didn't even have expanded playoffs for most of it. That's only been the last couple of years. So it was a harder road to hoe earlier in this streak than later, but the Astros went on, by every definition, a historic run. And right. We can run down, everybody knows about the 2 World Series. We can run down the pennants. We can run down the ALCS appearances. But what the Astros have accomplished since really 2015, I know 2016 is the last time we did make the playoffs, is a huge, huge accomplishment that if we were doing, I guess, the 12th inning now of Ken Burns baseball, the Astros would actually have to get mentioned finally.
And not just for banging trash cans.
Or, because they introduced AstroTurf and it upset Bob Costas, which is the entirety of their mentions in the first 9 innings.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And, I think it's natural to focus on what went wrong. And frankly, we're going to focus on what went wrong on this episode. But you can't take a look back. You can't, and you have to be honest and recognize, okay, everything that happened this year to some degree was inevitable. And it's only inevitable because it's happened to literally every team that's ever gone on any kind of a playoff run. And to your point, for the most part, teams that win a World Series do it the way the Rangers have done it, by winning one and then becoming irrelevant again immediately.
Hey, did they finish with a winning record? I'd stop watching.
I don't know. God, I hope not. I think they might have. That would make me sad.
Because they're gonna chest thump about that.
Oh no, they 500.
Well, that's a high watermark for them based on their historical finishes. So good job. Good job, Dallas.
Good job, Dallas. Of course, the 2 big questions are going to be the job security of Dana Brown and Joe Espada. I want to start with Joe Espada first. Andy, do you think he comes back? And if he does or doesn't, do you think that's the right choice?
Without any inside information, so everything is speculation at this point. I think that at the end of this week, we're probably looking for a new manager, and we probably have the same general manager. There's a lot of variables in there. Obviously, things could change. I know some people on the online communities were hanging their hat on the fact that Dana Brown or Jim Crane, I forget which, said that both Espada and Brown would be available for their normal media availability this week, which means nothing. I think all that it may mean is that whatever decisions are being made aren't happening today, which is good. I mean, take a couple of days to cool down about it before you start firing people. But based on the things we have heard on this show and from people who talk to us, silly people, Espada lost the clubhouse, and he lost the clubhouse probably about 30, 35 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time in Major League Baseball to not be doing the one job that a Major League Baseball manager has in 2025, keeping those guys pulling in the same way. I know neither of us put a lot of trust, faith, whatever, in this idea that stock in the idea that players aren't trying or they don't look like they're trying hard enough. But this was very much a team, especially last week, that looked for all the world like they had quit. There was just little life, and even little life when they managed to score a few runs against the A's. It wasn't a happy team last Thursday. It wasn't a happy team going into Anaheim this weekend. Certainly couldn't have been happy when they blew a 3-1 lead in the 8th inning to the Angels, who somehow they have one guy on their team who can hit, and you throw him a meatballs twice in the same game to end up losing that game.
And that was the difference. I mean, like, that was winning that game was not making the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part, because there was a scenario where the Astros make the playoffs if XYZ happens. X and Y happened. Z didn't happen because we didn't sweep the Angels and we needed to. It was literally this close, one game. And you look back at and you don't pin it on one game because there's plenty of times to lose games in a 162-game season. But I was doing a little bit of just hand counting, so the numbers might be entirely accurate. Since July 1st, the Astros have had 27 games where they scored 2 runs or less. Want to know what their record is in those games, Jim?
I'm going to guess like 2-25.
1-26.
Wow.
So if you turn around one of those games, you're
That's
in the
me.
playoffs.
I'm a glasses half full kind of guy.
You are. If you turn around 4 of those games, which would still just make you 5-22, you win the division.
Yeah, and I think if you turn around maybe a couple more of those, you win. You have. Well, actually, if you win this division, you also have the 2 seed.
And so, and I bring that up we're going to talk about injuries and the historic amount of injuries the Astros had. I know the WAR number has to be over 18 that they lost in player injuries to guys like Pena and Alvarez and Paredes in the second half of the season. But ultimately, the team that was there just didn't hit enough. That's a giant amount of games to not score runs.
Yeah, and then to show you just how everything fell off, in some of the games they did score runs, they didn't pitch well.
Yeah,
and it's like you didn't have any kind of clutch pitching, particularly, Fromber and George Costanza going into the last 2 games of that Mariners series. You weren't even in the game before the game even got started. You were down 5 runs in the second inning in both of those games. Like, no offense can claw their way out of that, particularly one as dysfunctional as what the Astros were rolling out there.
Yeah, and it's, to your point, as how we open the show, the Astros have a lot of things they need to look at seriously if they're to come back and be not just making the playoffs this year, because I think you could roll out the same roster next year, have half the health that you had or half the health issues that you had in 2025 and make the playoffs next year. I don't think that anybody in the American League's inherently going to get that much better. But if you want to be a World Series contender again, I think there needs to be some real soul searching about how this team is constructed from the front office to the field management to the way the outfield wall is constructed, to especially the players that are on the roster, because whatever reason.
Expand on the way the outfield wall is constructed. I'm curious.
Well, we went into the first half was fine, and the first half I think is what makes the second half even more frustrating. But there's an issue with our players hitting at Minute Maid Park or Daikin Park or Enron Field or Astros Park, any of the four names. Pick which one's your favorite. And we've made it a little bigger. We painted over some Budweiser signs a couple years ago. It didn't really help. And you look at other ballparks, our batter's eye, as we've pointed out, is smaller than most batters' eyes. It's not as dark necessarily a background as some of the other ballparks. And there's got to be something that can be changed to make it more hitter friendly for the guys that are there 81 times a year. And I think that's a real thing. And it's been going on since 2023. So this is a 3-year deal. So either the players we have can't hit at the park or the park that we have is too hard to hit in. But something needs to start changing. That's almost a cosmetic thing at this point, because I think the makeup of the players on the team isn't the right mix. And I am now fully stretching because Jim took a phone call in the middle of this. I hope everything's okay with him. But you start looking at the lineup as it's constructed. They've got some real issues going into next year, which we'll talk about more in future shows. But you've got a glut of what I would call B to C level outfielders. You have too many of them, but none of them are especially good. You've got two guys that should be permanent DHs on the team in Yordan Alvarez and Jose Altuve. And as the rules are currently constructed, until Rob Manfred gets another brain fart about let's just do all DHs. You've got to play one of them in the field every day, and I don't know at this point what that means. It probably means Jose Altuve in left field a lot next year, because the other problem is your current outfield or infield is made up of a bunch of third basemen and Christian Walker. And Christian had a perfectly fine season. I'm not here to bury Christian Walker, but you look at what else is out there. You've got Correa, Pena, Paredes, Dubon, I guess, is still technically going to be part of the team. Urias. You've got a lot of guys for 4 positions. And Jose Altuve has to be in the lineup somewhere. So that's probably going to rob some of your functionality. You don't have a place for Bryce Matthews. And despite the fact that he's hit 4 home runs out of his 6 major league hits, I don't necessarily think he's ready to be a major league player because he strikes out way too much. We're doing the same thing with Zach Cole, by the way. Astros Twitter is just in love with Zach Cole and is convinced that he's a starting outfielder next year. I'm not seeing that because he still strikes out way too much. This team has to get back to what made it good, and that's really tearing it down, not necessarily to the studs, but really getting back to, we need guys who see a lot of pitches. We need guys who don't strike out a lot. We need guys who understand that their primary job is getting on base.
One of the questions, though, that came up was that was the same problem last year. And they came into the offseason trying to correct it, and they brought in Paredes, which was a step in the right direction. But the other question becomes, if you have the same problem, even though you've changed some of the personnel, is that because you picked the wrong personnel, or is it a messaging thing? And therefore, how do you fix the messaging outside of changing the messenger?
Well, I think at the very least, we've seen probably the last of Cintron and Snichter as the hitting coaches for this team. I think they're probably both very competent at their jobs. I think there are players who respond to them more than others. But I think when you've been in a role, in any kind of leadership role, coaching role for close to a decade, like Cintron has been, and I think Snichter's been a little bit less, I think the message just becomes part of the background noise at some point. I think a new voice is necessary for the guys that are going to come back to this team. but I also think that's true of the manager. And if the manager's gone, then you have a whole host of new coaches potentially, because my guess is if you're going to make that change, Jim Crane's going to want a brand name manager, and a brand name manager isn't going to come in and babysit Dusty Baker's staff. And ultimately that's what we have right now is they hired Joe Espada so they didn't have to make any hard calls on Dusty Baker's staff.
Yeah, I think that's probably an accurate assessment. I do believe, I think you hit the nail on the head in the sense that everything about the team felt dysfunctional in the last month plus. I mean, I think they're 10 games under 500 since sweeping the Dodgers. So it's not been good. And obviously injuries are part of the problem, but this team, Andy, is going to continue a slide toward mediocrity if we give everybody a pass by just saying, well, everybody was injured. Maybe people won't get injured next year. But here's the thing. The biggest impact loss on this team was not Yordan Alvarez. The biggest loss on this team was Josh Hader. Josh Hader led the team. I think it was 5 WAR is what he represented himself. You lost being in the playoffs by 1 game. How many times did we see Josh Hader pitch 2 outs, 2 inning saves in April? How many times did we see Josh Hader go in with 4-run leads? How many times did he go into extra innings in games that were tied? And then he hurt his shoulder. So that isn't just, he tripped on home plate like Yordan Alvarez, or he got hit in the outfield and broke his thumb. That is, to me, screams a misuse of your best asset. And then losing that best asset cost you the playoffs. That to me is a manager thing directly. That isn't, I believe that there's reasons to say goodbye to Joe Espada that aren't just feels and vibes.
Well, and I don't think it's just Josh Hader if you're talking usage, because there's a lot of noise about why Caleb Ort is hurt right now. And that's getting thrown into a game when he wasn't fully warmed up because Espada lost track of what was going on.
He either lost track or changed his mind and brought him in early because of panic.
Yeah. Either one is not a good look, just so we're clear. But there's been a number of issues with usage of bullpen guys. Brian Abreu will come in like he did but during the A's game, and people are scratching their head because Brian Abreu is a guy you have to use. Well, he had like a 9-run lead, 8-run lead at that point. Yeah. Why is Abreu coming in? We got to save our bullets for the Angels series. Well, you saw what happens when Brian Abreu doesn't pitch in 4 days. You can't get a damn thing over the plate, which is why he's not the closer on this team.
Mm-hmm.
I think he stepped in as admirably as he could, but he just, unless you're using him heavily, and some guys need that, his breaking stuff doesn't break, and he can't get it over the plate. On that second day, he's usually okay. But that's something a manager has to know. He has to know how the pieces work together. He has to know that your 8th inning guy needs a certain amount of regular work, and you can't just forget him because you're getting blown out in game after game after game. I'd like to say it was the other way. Well, we didn't use our back end guys so much because we were winning games by so many runs. That hasn't been the case in forever. We get like one of those every 10 days or so.
Yeah.
That was fun. But I think it still comes down to the offense that's the major problem for this team. I think the Astros have some really hard questions to ask. Yordan Alvarez being one of those. Now, I'm not advocating getting rid of him.
No.
But there's got to be some acknowledgement that he's probably only going to play 120 games a year. And you have to start building a team around that idea.
And the problem with Yordan Alvarez is even though he is not an old man, he plays like one, which means your natural spot for where to put Jose Altuve at the end of his career, you can't put him there because you have to put Alvarez at DH as well. And that hamstrings the team immensely. We've already seen that they're doing everything they can to hide Altuve when he's on defense. And frankly, he's one of those rare players this past year, Andy, where his offensive numbers at DH were much better because he's old.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like people that want to DFA Jose Altuve, even though he still led your team in multiple offensive categories, he's playing like a 35-year-old guy at the end of his career. It's not his fault that we need him to be playing like somebody 5 years younger because he still has to be responsible to play a key defensive position because the DH is brittle.
So he finished slashing 265, 329, 442 with a foot injury. So a 771 OPS. I think that's top 75 in Major League Baseball at 35 years old. 26 home runs, 24 doubles. 10 stolen bases, although I don't know why we let him ever run. That's the whole, but that's true his whole career.
He's got a 43% stolen base rate as part of the problem.
But if this lineup was better constructed, he's not a two-hitter. He's a guy that probably should be hitting 6th or 7th at this point in his career. And those numbers for a 6th or 7th hitter are perfectly acceptable. Yeah. I think, part of the acknowledgement, too, that 265 doesn't sound great. Major League Baseball's offense over the course of the entire league this year has been muted. And I'm sure we'll get some postmortem over that because I don't think pitching has been appreciably better about why teams aren't hitting the way they were even 5 years ago. But you got 155 games out of Jose Altuve. He had a bad streak in August into about midway of September, mostly coinciding with a foot injury that he played through. I'm not worried. Jose Altuve is the least of the problems for next year, outside of the fact that he's a man without a position at this point.
I concern myself a little bit with what are the long-term ramifications of Paredes playing on his hamstring. Obviously, noble effort. Not obviously, it's the kind of guy you want to have in your team, but it is the gamble. And the gamble is, did he potentially expose himself to further injury? And it didn't work out. You didn't make the playoffs. So now do you get him back in the spring? Hopefully he just needs to keep resting, but that's not something we're going to know for a while, but definitely an issue.
Yeah, I'm less worried about Paredes, and part of that's because I don't know if he's on the team next year. He should be. I think he's a great piece. And again, we've got too many infielders and not enough positions to play them. While you had to step away, I pointed out that Manfred still has not allowed us to put 2 DHs in the same game, which would solve the Altuve-Jordan issue.
Wouldn't it?
But I'm sure it's coming. More DHs. Let's do all DHs.
I think we should. I think we should have an offense and a defense, just like in football.
Why don't we, instead of playing this whole defense thing, why not just do home run derby?
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. I actually don't think you're wrong. I think there's a day when there's another DH added, or you really do have a full-time defensive team and a full-time offensive team, and it will be unrecognizable. But fortunately, I'll probably be peeing myself in a nursing home by then. So there's that. There's that to look forward to.
And we're already at the age where we talk about how better things used to be. So it's fine. That's the circle of life.
We haven't discussed Dana Brown. Yeah, sorry.
But before we get there, what do you do with Paredes next year? Because he's not playing third base if Carlos Correa is on this team.
He should be your first baseman, and you should find some way to move.
What do you do with Christian Walker?
I think you have to.
And the idea that Paredes is going to play second, which he hasn't done successfully at Major League Baseball in his career, seems like a lot. And I know you can't judge a lot by what a guy physically looks like, but Paredes does not look like a middle infielder.
No, I believe you find a way to move Walker, even if you eat money, and Paredes is your first baseman.
And Walker, if that happens, helped you out this weekend because he got his OPS over 700 with those home runs. So he's at 718, finishing the year with 27 home runs. And I know, he makes $20 million, and you're not going to be able to trade him. That's not a lot of money in 2026 baseball.
And if we're to believe the rumors, there was interest in him at the deadline for people.
At some point, the Twins were interested in him, which would have been weird. But anyway, but again, until you can move him, what do you do with Paredes? And if you do move him, what's the pushback, if any, in the free agent market going forward about guys who are, hey, I want to sign this contract with you because I want to be here for 3 years, and you've dealt this other guy after 1. I think baseball players understand that at some level, but there's still got to be some kind of, hey, I don't know if this is a stable situation for me.
Well, and of course, the biggest question about stability is going to be what happens after 2026, but that's something we can get into.
Well, there's no baseball.
Yeah.
I think literally whoever wins the 2026 World Series gets to be all-time champion because I don't know that baseball is going to be played for a while after that.
Well, and part of me wonders if because of the lockout coming, if Jim Crane is going to find it easier just to do nothing with his managerial staff in the front office. I mean, I think the hitting coaches are gone regardless. But you can make the argument, why go through all of this to just then not have baseball the next year anyway? I mean, you could.
You could. I do think, despite the fact that today, again, we're back to Jim Crane being cheap on the Astros Twitter.
Are we?
Yeah,
We're
sure.
there again?
That's the reason. That Crane likes winning. And yes, there's a financial component too. Yes, he's got real estate holdings that are kind of dependent on it. And at some point, Manfred will get his way and push through a salary cap, and some level of baseball will get played post the whatever lockout strike work stoppage is going to look like in 27. Maybe it's sometime during the 27 season. Maybe it pushes to 28. I don't think anybody really knows at this point, but it's going to look different. Crane, beyond everything else, likes winning. It drives a whole lot of other stuff in his personal world, but I think at the core of it, he likes winning because you don't make the deals that he's tried to make that he's kind of insisted that his front office has made. And then, one of which cost James Click his job, and one of which I'm going to suspect might cost Dana Brown his job. We'll talk about in a second. Without having that need to win.
We need to stop, or Astros fans need to stop with the lazy, hey, I thought about this for 3 seconds and he's Jerry Jones comparison. Look, I'm a Cowboys fan. I know what Jerry Jones looks like. This isn't Jerry Jones, okay? Yes, he made some decisions after the Jeff Lunau era and the James Click era without his general manager, but that's in part, he is on record as feeling like Jeff Lunau really betrayed him with a lot of the stuff that happened behind the scenes that led to the scandal. He tried to give a general manager the ability to handle the team and be hands off about it, and he got burned. It's a natural reaction. But look at this year's trade deadline, and Chandler Rome had a great article about it in The Athletic. 3 key trades, one of which was made by Jim Crane, and that was the trade to get Carlos Correa. The other 2 made by Dana Brown. The 2 guys Dana Brown acquired, Andy, were pretty much unplayable in the last 3 weeks of the season. You said something about Dana Brown's job. What did you mean? And do you feel like Dana Brown needs to be concerned about his job this morning?
I don't think Jesus Sanchez and Ramon Urias are the profile of players that are going to cost a general manager their job. I think when the owner tells you, I want a starting pitcher, and Dylan Cease is a guy I like, and you don't get the ball across the goal line, that's a mark against you. We had the same thing with James Click, and it worked out. We won a World Series, but Click blatantly defied something that Crane wanted to have happen, and it cost him his job ultimately. I think Brown is towing towards that same territory because Crane likes a handful of names that he knows, good or ill. That's kind of the guy he is. He knows Dylan Cease's name. The Astros have tried to acquire Dylan Cease for a couple of years now, not through free agency, of course, but by a trade. And they were, to all accounts, very close this trade deadline. And Brown didn't get it done because the cost would have been Bryce Matthews and a couple of other guys, but that's my understanding was the big hang up was Bryce Matthews.
Yeah.
Bryce Matthews, who does not have a role on this team for 2026, by the way.
And you didn't get a starting pitching, and
you got no starting pitching. Yeah. I mean, at the end of it,
starting pitching.
At the end of it, you could have picked up Charlie Morton because he was going to be better, even with being DFA'd by the Tigers, anything that we were throwing out there at that point. There were players to be had, and Brown didn't do that. Brown also and I understand contracts and money and all that, and there's a lot of different variables and factors into this. But I don't think we can do in 26 what we did in 25 and just, well, we're going to get Javier and Garcia and McCullers back, so it's all going to work out. We don't have to be aggressive in the offseason about getting a couple of veteran guys in the rotation. And we're in the same position now, but worse because we don't even have 5 guys that you can really line up and say, this is your rotation for 26, and we'll get a couple guys back. Because our rotation going into 26 right now is Hunter Brown and Christian Javier.
Yeah.
And about 4 TBDs.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't get, people want to get mad at Jason Alexander for not pitching well against Seattle. That dude pitched above his talent level the entire season he was with the Astros.
It is also very likely he's not going to be in the org next year because he's a 32-year-old journeyman pitcher who had 1 appearance in the majors before this season.
He never should have been the guy. One of the big indictments on Dana Brown is he is the guy you were counting on to clinch a playoff spot after Framber fell apart. That's the problem. That's a problem. And yes, part of it is injuries. But also, you're the general manager. You need to be creating organizational depth any way you can. And you saw that out of James Click, and you saw that out of Jeff Lunau. And I don't know that you're seeing that out of Dana Brown. And we don't know, Andy, we don't know what really were Dana Brown's marching orders. Were his marching orders to also keep strengthening the farm system, which he has done through the draft, and he hasn't really moved players, although Drew Gilbert being good is not going to help that.
I mean, if that even lasts, though, yes, he's moved to the Giants and had a good end of the year. You could write a number of books on guys who have 2 good months in the major leagues. I hope for Drew Gilbert's family that he's a great player, and we're all talking about regret later on in his career. The odds are against that. And you're right. We don't know exactly what the marching orders are when Dana Brown is hired. But we do have a good idea of what the marching orders are within the span of a season, within the span of a trade deadline. And I just got to think that at the end of the day, Crane is fairly results driven. And if those results don't work out and you didn't do something he kind of specifically asked you to do, that's a problem for a guy like Jim Crane. And he is ultimately the owner. He is ultimately the most successful owner in Houston sports history. Certainly for the Astros. Why people keep questioning that, I don't really understand.
Know either. Well, the people that we know that question it, most of them are academics who have never worked in the real world. So to them, they think that an owner should just put all the money in and shut up, which is unrealistic. Even if those individuals owned a team, it's not how it would be.
Well, and I don't think that, Click is one thing. The Lunau issue is an entirely different. Most people don't have all of the information when they start talking about it. But Jeff Lunau made a lot of enemies in Major League Baseball during his run as the general manager.
Very much.
And the Brian Taubman incident was not the first Brian Taubman incident. It was the first one that we found out about as fans because it was really, really public. And Sports Illustrated picked it up, and it became a national thing for a couple minutes. But ultimately, if you're the general manager and one of your prized lieutenants is off the rails, it's because they feel like they can be off the rails because that's the environment that's been created. That, in addition to the fact that the Astros got caught in a cheating scandal and Rob Manfred and his goons don't like Jeff Lunau, led to a pretty easy decision for Jim Crane, although I'm 99% sure he was told, these are your penalties if Lunau's no longer in your organization. But I think that was a very easy conversation for Crane because Crane was done with him at that point too. You're mute. No sound. I'm sure he realized what Jim is trying to say right now.
What I was going to say. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
He's made a brilliant point, Andy. And go ahead.
What I was going to say is, wow, this is definitely a Monday. No, I have heard that Crane to some degree felt betrayed by Lunau because Lunau Crane put a lot of trust in him to run the organization, and it wasn't ran in a way that ended up damaging his investment. And you can't do that. And That's why, if anything, Crane's going to be a little gun shy when it comes to just handing the keys over to the next guy. I don't think he wants to play Jerry Jones. I really don't think so at all. That said, I don't know if that means Dana Brown doesn't come back this year. I honestly would like to see a complete makeover of the front office. And I would like to see us go look for somebody who fits more in that James Click, Jeff Lunau mode as far as approach to players. And I don't want to ever hear back of the baseball card again. I don't want to hear any of that stuff. That would be my preference.
So you'd be good with somebody that Biggio and Bagwell don't vouch for, because that was the big selling point for Dana Brown was, this guy played on the Seton Hall team with Biggio or carried his jockstrap or something back in the day.
Well, I tell you one thing. Like, I think that whenever the next manager rolls around, Brad Ausmus will get an interview, and I don't hate that idea as a manager.
I think that Crane will be looking for a brand name. The same way that Dusty Baker was a brand name when that spot came open. Espada, hindsight 2020, but I think we're starting to see some of the reasons that Espada wasn't considered for different jobs that he interviewed for, that he wasn't considered a big loss when he left the Yankees after the 2017 season. And again, guys can grow and get better and all that kind of fun stuff. And I don't think this season's results are squarely on the shoulders of Joe Espada, but I also think Joe Espada is probably the one who's going to take the fall for it, and he deserves some of it.
He deserves, yes, for sure.
But that's another mark against Dana Brown, because Joe Espada was Dana Brown's guy.
I believe a full makeover. I understand that some people might listen to this and think it's knee-jerk fan stuff. What I don't want to see are finding excuses to not make decisions, and then we wake up and it's been 5 years and we've incrementally slid. I would prefer go big, swing big, and if that doesn't work out, then at least it felt like you were doing. And I understand the logic, the faulty logic that's there too, of you can't just do stuff to do stuff, but the last thing I would do is hate to point out, oh, look, there's a lot of injuries and this thing happened and that thing happened. And we might have a lockout in 2027 and therefore do nothing. I would hate to see that be the solution.
Well, I think whatever it is that Astros fans need to prepare themselves for, hopefully a period of change. They need to prepare themselves for some of their favorite players not being Astros anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of, for whatever reason, sacred cows. Mauricio Dubon comes to mind right now, but Chas McCormick, Jake Myers, there's some other guys that I think are potentially not going to be around, either because they're going to make too much money for what they actually bring to the table, or they're going to be the few marketable pieces we have to start acquiring starting pitching. But the team is going to look different next year, because I think the team has to look different next year. If we roll out the same lineup on March 31st next year, I think that's opening day. And it's one guy different. I don't think that anything's going to be different this time next year.
No, because all you're going to be doing is crossing your fingers and hoping you don't have the injury bug again. And like statistically, it's unlikely you'll have the same level of injury, but that can't be your strategy. Hope is not a strategy.
And as our point, we got a comment. Our friend Zach Beeson has decided that his Angels are already out of contention for next year. So we're better off than the Angels, I guess.
That's funny, Zach. All right. I see you. All right. Look, we have about 10 minutes left in the show. A&M got the win. Break down the win for me, Andy, but I also want you to break down. I sent you the clip of Mike Elko's press conference, and I understand to some degree his frustration about not being asked about good things. But to which I would say, and Andy, this is not an Aggie thing. I feel the same way when Joe Espada gets uppity with the media. I felt the same way when Sark gets up with the media. You're playing big boy football with big boy media, and that media being the Houston media. Don't get pissy if they don't give you pats on the back for the thing you did right. They're going to ask you why your offense was bad.
Yeah. So I'm of two minds of this. Mike Elko's not wrong. And basically, we could probably stick the clip in here in the post on the recorded version of the show. But to sum it up, he was being asked a lot of questions at the very open immediately after the game ended in his availability around this idea that you underperformed on offense, you didn't score a lot of points. The interception was thrown that shouldn't have been thrown. What was the play calling thought process there? It's stuff that you get. And if you are not an A&M fan, that all seems fairly innocuous. But if you are an A&M fan and you already have a certain level of battered Aggie syndrome ingrained in you, I think Elko kind of snapped a little bit and basically said that why aren't you asking us about how it feels to be 4-0? Why aren't you asking us about what it's like to hold a SEC team to 176 yards in a football game? Just why everything has to be so negative instead of being a little bit positive. He's not wrong. However, I almost fully expect him to apologize when he does his coach's availability this afternoon. You don't take on the media in that role. And I get that it's frustrating because, believe me, most of us as A&M fans, regardless of what they will tell you Sunday morning or Monday morning, Saturday watch that game expecting Auburn to come back in the last minute and win that game after being dominated statistically for the entire time. And I think that's part of the frustration. And Elko, unfortunately, took that out on the media, which you don't ever win those battles. So I don't know what the point of that is. He does at least come across as more good-natured than, a Jimbo Fisher does when he makes those kind of comments. So I think it will go away a little bit easier. But the head coach of Texas A&M, whoever that is, has to understand the decades of disappointment that most of our fan base has sat through. Some of those beat writers, I know it's a mix because you've got guys from the student newspaper in there with actual veteran writers, but some of those media members have been sitting in there for the better part of a decade wondering why this program continues to underperform year after year after year. And I think at some point it's put up or shut up. It's great that we're 4-0, but we were 6-1 at some point last year and had basically controlled our own destiny to go to the SEC championship game and proceeded to win one out of our last 5 games. And so until we don't do that, that's going to be what the expectation that everybody has is. And rather than worry about managing those expectations of the media, Elko probably needs to focus more on, learning how to turn those questions into positives. If they're not asking him a positive question, he's fully allowed to turn it around and talk about what he wants to.
Right.
Nick Saban didn't answer a single question directly his entire time as a head coach because he just kept saying the things he wanted to say. And maybe that's a lesson that Elko has to learn. But you don't win battles with the media. You never do. It's kind of a fool's errand to try. I appreciate what he was saying. And on some level, he's not wrong. But it's just making enemies when you don't need to have enemies, I guess, is a nice way to put it.
Well, we break down the performance then.
Well, it was a lot of the same old. Statistically, there's no way this game is a 6-point game.
There was a lot of bad officiating.
There was, but ultimately you roll up almost 500 yards of offense. I think it's 471 or something like that. And you score 16 points. You've missed 2 field goals. You had at least 2 touchdowns called back because of penalties. You had almost a football field, or I think 120 yards plus of penalty yardage. Were some of those ticky-tack? Yes. Were some of those just stupid things like your offensive lineman wandering downfield?
Yeah.
You just can't.
Yeah, there were a total of 20-something penalties against both teams in that game.
And that was kind of what I was worried about walking into that game, was that because Auburn spent the entire week whining about what happened in Oklahoma, and some of it was absolutely justified to the point that the SEC apologized for how bad one of those calls were. You almost could predict that the officiating was going to overcompensate on the next Auburn game, and unfortunately, that was with A&M. There were a couple things. The Albert Regis touching the punter and getting a roughing the kicker call. I mean, I walk by people more aggressively like that trying to get to my car in the parking garage. I've never been arrested for assault, so there's that.
Yet.
I mean, it's always possible. So it was a sloppy game. It looked like an undisciplined game on the offensive side of the ball. Defense looked great. I don't think that Auburn is nearly as bad as they looked. They're not a good offensive team, but we made them look a lot worse than they probably
I want to talk about a couple of things, though. I want to grant that, yes, the A&M defense did look really, really, really good. But just from a neutral observer, as much as you can be neutral about it, Andy, that looked like one of the most inept quarterback performances I've ever seen. Because even whenever he had time and he had a receiver open, it's like he threw it in the exact opposite. I've never seen anything like it. There was one point where I thought an Auburn wide receiver was going to go punch him in the face because it was at the end of the game. It looked like he was running an in route wide open, and he had time, and he just threw it out of bounds, like threw it to the boundary. Like, what is happening? How is this guy playing Division I football?
Well, again, Jackson Arnold, not a great quarterback. However, if there is anything that Mike Elko is especially good at as a defensive coordinator, because he wears that hat too for A&M, it is creating confusing secondary packages for quarterbacks who are unintelligent. And Jackson Arnold is unintelligent.
People forget get benched.
But that's part of the job is how you line up and what they think they're seeing, not being the thing they're actually seeing. And so for us, yes, it looks like receivers were running wide open because they were a lot. But for the quarterback, they're seeing a safety over the top that might not be there. Or they're seeing corner help that might not actually be there, and they get confused by it. Jackson Arnold spent most of the day confused. I'm sure being sacked nearly 20 times in the last two games has not helped his mental clarity. But it is a defense designed to take advantage of unintelligent quarterbacks. And I think what you saw for Jackson Arnold is that whatever physical gifts he may have, the book learning ain't so good.
Well, and the people do need to remember this dude got cut from OU. Like, I don't think he's the one who started against Texas in the Red. I think he was benched by then. So,
yes.
This just shows you
because y'all got to continue your really bizarre streak of only facing backup quarterbacks, which is continuing into this season.
Yeah, and it's such a weird deal because they might there's thought that Mateer or Mater, however you say it. When I say Mater, I think of the redneck record guy from Cars.
Yeah,
so that fits.
So it's far more entertaining than the actual quarterback.
Yeah, Mater. Yeah, that fits then.
Who doesn't love Larry the Cable Guy?
Nobody. He's a national treasure. But they're saying though that he might actually play 2 weeks after hand surgery, which to me is like, okay, we'll bring it on. Then we're gonna hit you in the hand with the helmet one time and then have the backup anyway. So I find it fascinating that the Sooners would even consider bringing him back less than 3 weeks from having surgery on his throwing hand.
And you're getting a backup in Lagway I don't think Lagway's playing this week, although that Florida's probably better off without him. Not sure where that fifth star came from, folks, but it doesn't look like it was based on.
No, Florida also lost their two of their starting defensive backs as well. But let me ask you this, because we've now seen since our last show, I think we've seen two new head coaches fired. The mullet is gone, and then Arkansas lost Sam Pittman.
They didn't lose him. They know exactly where he is.
They lost him. They fired him. But going against what seems to be all logic as far as potentially losing players in the portal as opposed to just hanging on to him for another week or two. What's the logic there?
Well, Arkansas played their fifth game yesterday. So those players
so it's 5 games. It's not like a market.
Well, it's 4 games.
4 games. Okay.
Yeah. So the players have to have played 4 games to not have a redshirt eligibility year, if they had one available to them anyway. So once you reach that 5th game, all that kind of stuff is out the window. Now you're going to have some players who didn't appear in all four, and but that's a minor consideration. And frankly, I would assume most programs start trying to plug those guys in those early games anyway, so they can start that clock a little bit from an eligibility standpoint. The Arkansas situation's interesting. So as an A&M fan, first of all, you felt a lot better about that Notre Dame game watching them dismantle Arkansas the way they did in that 11 o'clock game.
100%.
And then you had to watch your own game and go, well, maybe not. Here or there. There is some credible information that Bobby Petrino has been campaigning behind the scenes to take over the job should anything unfortunate happen to Sam Pittman this year, like we don't win a game. And Notre Dame's got a really good defense, but the number one quarterback in the country played for Arkansas and looked like a junior high kid against Notre Dame's defense all of a sudden. So I'm wondering, the conspiracy theory guy in me is like, if Bobby Petrino really wanted that job for the rest of the year, was he really trying all that hard on play calling offensively? Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I think most college football fans will agree that Bobby Petrino's evil incarnate, so he probably was. But he's now your head coach at Arkansas. Sam Pittman, by all accounts, is a decent guy, a good guy, excellent offensive line coach. And if he wasn't married to being a Razorback, I would fully expect somebody to start trying to snap him up. But I think he'll probably go to be a, what do they call those, special assistant to the president, special assistant to the athletic director.
It's the same job Vince Young has.
Yeah. Although one of Vince's sons plays for St. John's or Kincaid or I think St. John's. I saw a highlight of him on the news this weekend.
How do you look? Do you look like Daddy?
He ran real fast.
Oh, there he looks like Daddy.
Yeah, Vinny, I think he said his name was. Anyway, so Arkansas is in disarray. I fully expect that their offense will look better, and that's of interest to both of us because we both have to play Arkansas later on this year. OSU is a whole different story because Boone Pickens' money dried up a few years ago, and really the last vestige was, I'm a man, I'm 40, and he's 60 now. He cut off his hair, lost his job. And that's a program that was always the second banana program in the state of Oklahoma, which does not generate a lot of football talent to start with.
No.
And you don't have a lot of money coming in. I don't know that that's a school that competes in NIL free transfer football the way that they've been used to competing in non-free transfer NIL football the past decade. But a lot of that was based on, I think, a pretty good head coach, even if he was kind of a cartoon character.
Yeah.
He was burnt out.
I have a friend of mine who's got connection to Oklahoma State boosters, and there actually is sort of it was a pretty mutual decision.
Yeah. I think that, the coach at some point sees what's in front of him. I think he was there for just a god-awful amount of time. And I think there is a certain truth to the burnout part. I know the alumni base was ready for him to be gone, but I don't know that they're going to get anybody better anytime soon. So that's a program that could fall below the ranks of a Baylor. And I don't even know how Baylor's doing this year. They're just always the bottom to me. So maybe that's not a fair.
Also the moral bottom. Bunch of Baptists, rapists. Anyway, yeah. Well, hey, before we go, I do want to shout out to a special football player in my family. Braxton has started the NFL Flag Football League thing. He's playing for the Jets, so there's that. But he's apparently doing pretty good, playing a little quarterback, Andy. So maybe we'll get him on the 40 acres or in College Station before this show ends at some point.
Now, is that the Colt McCoy offense they run at that level, where it's just a bunch of 5-yard outs and hope that your receiver runs a lot?
Yeah, there's a lot of handoffs too.
Yeah.
He's pretty proud of the fact that he handed off to a running back who scored a touchdown. He's pretty excited. But I'm going to try to get us
at that level. That is a touchdown pass.
It's a touchdown. Yes. And I'm actually going to try to get us tickets to see when Arkansas comes to town when they're here for Thanksgiving, since we won't be able to get Texas A&M tickets. I don't have that kind of money. But all right, that does wrap up this episode of Off Day. We'll be back on Friday. Until then, I'm going to rededicate this song to Craig Harmon if he's listening. For Andy, I'm Jim. Again, this has been Off Day with Ballpark Nation for the Astros. Turn off the lights, guys.
Turn out the lights. The party's over. They say that all good things must end. Call it a night. A party.